sitting in parliament.
A discussion dubbed More Voting, Less Democracy brought together arguably the two most renowned prime ministers in Africa, Raila Odinga and Morgan Tsvangirai. And it's here that circumstances under which they decide to form coalition governments were revisited. Asked whether he would have entered another coalition, Raila said,
"Of course the answer is no. But as I said, it is a difficult situation. Like in our case, as Kofi said, he came and found dispute. But I think that is putting it very mildly, because you are not starting in a vacuum. The other side has already appointed a cabinet. So they have to relinquish some positions. Then you are now left to negotiate with the other party. It's like going to remove a piece of meat from the mouth of a hyena.
Tsvangirai, on the other hand, said there's need for both incumbents and the opposition to dialogue to make coalitions work.
Most often, opponents have a certain perception and a certain view, only until you sit down and talk.
We've talked about governance and governments, but do you need a government? At one stage, Ivory Coast had two governments and it wasn't working. Belgium had no government and it was working well. Thank you.
The two were also put on the record to commit themselves towards promising to adhere to timelines and respecting the opposition if they ever become presidents.
I think both of them have a very good chance of being presidents. So I want to ask President Odinga and President Tsvangirai two things. One, will you accept term limits and stick to them? And two, tell us here on camera, on the record, how will you treat the leaders of your opposition?
Important to have term limits. Any renewal process, it's very important. So I am committed to term limits to the extent that it allows for new ideas, new leadership style to come into the process of leadership. The issue is that we occupy a position where we have been victims. And the tendency for the victim is revenge. I think it's very important for those that are in a position of being victims to recognize that the more you become retributive, the more you perpetuate the destabilization of the country. So
I fully support the term limit, and I don't agree with those who introduce term limits, but when they want to reach the goalpost, they mobilize the country for extensions or for removal of term limits altogether. We cannot grow without opposition. The role of the opposition is to keep the government of the day on check. So the opposition needs to have space to operate.
Odinga, Tsvangirai and Annan are some of the international political leaders participating at the World Economic Forum on Africa that comes to a close tomorrow and seeks to identify issues hampering economic growth in the world, and this time specifically in Africa. Hussein Mohamed, Citizen Live at 9 in Cape Town, South Africa.